Okay.
All right. Well, welcome everybody to the Carpinteria Birdwatchers online meeting for April 9th, 2020. Tonight's meeting, this afternoon's meeting, will be on hummingbirds, which is, of course, a very fun and exciting topic. We will get to that quite quickly. A few just housekeeping things before we really get started. So if you are not speaking, we ask that you mute your mic so it makes the audio channel easier for us to deal with. If you forget, one of the co-hosts in the meeting might mute your mic for you. So if you start talking and no one seems to be hearing you, check to see if your mic is muted and unmute yourself. If you have your camera turned on, just be aware that other participants can see you. And also, we are live streaming this meeting on YouTube. So it's possible that there will be people seeing you who are not here in the Zoom meeting. So, assuming everyone is comfortable with that, we're good to go. And also be aware that that Zoom live stream will be available going forward as an archive of the meeting. So it's there for reference. People can watch it after the fact. If you want to ask a question, a good way to, or have a comment while we're presenting, a good way to do that is with the group chat feature in Zoom. You can just enter a message to everyone and we'll see that, and whoever's presenting can pause and respond at some point later on. And also in Zoom, there's a hand raise feature, I think under participants. So if you look for that, you should be able to find it. And that's another way to just sort of indicate that you have input or a question or something, and we can pause and take note of that. And in addition, there's a chat function in the YouTube live stream. So if you're watching the meeting via the YouTube live stream, you can make comments in the chat there as well. So we have a few co-hosts, and I want to just briefly introduce them. So one is Tom Beland. Can you say hi, Tom? Yes, you're going to have to unmute to say hi.
Hello, everyone.
Okay. And Laurel Luby, who I think is not in the Zoom meeting, but she is moderating over on the YouTube live stream side. And then we have Jenny Slaughter, who is Jay Slaughter here.
Hello.
Hello. Okay. Any questions about any of that sort of housekeeping stuff before we get started? This is an opportunity to speak up. If you want to unmute and say something, or again, put it in the chat. All right, well, I'll keep going then. I do want to mention just a little bit of follow-up. So the last meeting we had, we talked about seawatches and pelagic birding. Has anybody been out sea watching since the last meeting? You can just wave your hand if you're on screen or. So I went out sea watching, and it was a lot of fun. And something that I did that I wanted to share with you. Let's see, this is going to require screen sharing. So give me a moment. Yeah, this is it. So I went out and did some sea watching at Refugio State Beach. And something that was really, this is my eBird list from there. And something that I saw that was really neat was a pigeon guillemot. So we talked in the Ocean Birds meeting last time about how pigeon guillemots were an ulcid that you could see from the mainland. But usually you have to go north of Point Conception to see them there. But I got a distant view and some poor photos of this pigeon guillemot flying off Refugio State Beach. So that was exciting for me. And let's see, and then another one that I wanted to share is, so just a few days later on April 6th, Thomas Turner was out at Campus Point, or on the West Campus Bluff Trail, which is kind of by Coal Oil Point up by UCSB. And he had 1,850 brant migrating by. So this is definitely a good time if you want to see those migrating seabirds to get out to a point and look for that. And then he also had a long-tailed duck. And Noah Gaines, I guess, was there with him as well, and got another description of that. But they didn't get photos of it, but that's a pretty awesome bird to see in Santa Barbara County for sure. So I just thought that was fun and wanted to share. Okay. Oh, and one other thing I wanted to mention too. So Tuesday, Jenny Slaughter, one of your co-hosts, texted me that there was a cattle egret down at Linden Field. And I got very excited because that's a tough bird to get for your Santa Barbara County year list, and I did not have one yet. So I raced down there in the rain and managed to see it, and that was really cool. And it is still there. So if you want to see a cattle egret, there's one down just right opposite the spot where there's that green, where Linden Field is, and there's that kind of ditch that runs through it that fills up with water in a rain. So go there and check out all the egrets there. Most of them are snowy egrets, but there is one cattle egret in there. And Dave Ledig shared.
Hey, John.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Jenny.
Friends of mine who found that are on our call today. It's Holly
wow.
and yeah, and they're the ones who gave me the heads up. And they're new to the group and they're on today for the first time.
Well, that's awesome. Are they on camera? Do they?
Yes.
So that's Holly. So if you want to unmute and just say hello and take credit for your awesome find. I know a lot of people have been there looking at that cattle egret over the last few days.
Yeah, great, good. But I see it every day now because I live right down by the beach. So drive by and check in on it. We saw a bunch in Costa Rica a couple months ago. So it was very exciting to see for the first time on Sunday, I think is when I first texted Jenny about it. So thank you, John. I'm excited to be here. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and I want to go ahead and share the photos that Dave Ledig shared with me of that cattle egret, because he got much better photos than I did. My photos are taken from inside the car with the window down and the rain coming down, and it's kind of fuzzy and far away. But he got much better photos. So if I've done this correctly, you should be seeing those. Oops, now you should be seeing those photos. So this is that cattle egret, and it's fun too because it's a nice adult breeding plumage cattle egret. So it's got the kind of buffy on the crown and the breast area. That again, there's no other egret that really looks like that. All right, so that was very exciting for me. So don't leave the meeting, but right after the meeting, rush on down there and see if that cattle egret is still there. And I'm going to try and go quickly through Hummingbirds so you still have time to go see that egret. Okay, let me make sure I am not neglecting anything else I wanted to mention. I don't think I am. Okay, so last chance to ask questions or make comments before we launch into Hummingbirds. Any questions or feedback? We're all excited to see Hummingbirds.
I would like to say that I saw that it has the black leg like a cattle egret too.
Did you see that cattle egret, or are you just saying looking at the photos you saw that?
Yeah, I saw the photos and they have the black legs just like the cattle egret. Like
the snowy egret, you're saying, or the great egret. I mean, the snowy egrets have black legs and yellow feet, right? And then but that big yellow bill is very distinctive on the cattle egret, really sets it apart from the snowy egret. And it's down there with snowy egrets, so you can get a really good size comparison. The cattle egret's about the same overall size, I think, but it's shorter, its legs are shorter, and it's a little chunkier.
Okay.
Anyway, all right, so we're all good to go on to Hummingbirds? All right, onward to Hummingbirds. And hopefully I can get better at this full screen management. Okay, so Hummingbirds are wonderful, of course, everyone knows that. I'm going to talk in general about hummingbirds for a little bit, just sort of, their adaptations and special things they can do. And then I'll go to specific species accounts of the hummingbirds that we have around here. And this is a great time, if you're a fan of hummingbirds, to be checking out the hummingbirds around here. And we'll talk about why that is in just a second. So, as most people know, they are the world's smallest birds, most of them just 3 to 5 inches long. So their closest relatives today are swifts, and they split off from swifts about 42 million years ago, when they began to specialize in nectar as a food source, a very high energy food source. And the species diversified rapidly, and there's been millions of years of co-evolution with ornithophilous plants, which is a cool word that I just learned recently. But basically these are plants that require birds to pollinate and reproduce them. So the hummingbirds are dependent on the plants to survive, and the plants at this point are dependent on the hummingbirds to survive. And plants have evolved these sort of deep tube-like flowers that hummingbirds can get into and most insects can't. And hummingbirds carry the pollen from flower to flower, and it all works out great. So this is the bee hummingbird, which I learned as a young bird watcher was sort of the answer to the trivia question: what is the smallest bird in the world? It's the bee hummingbird of Cuba. So one of the really amazing things about hummingbirds is their metabolism. So in flight, a hummingbird's heart beats more than 1,200 times per second, which is hard for me to imagine. That is extremely rapid. The oxygen consumption per gram of muscle 10 times higher than that for an elite human athlete. So they are doing massive aerobic exercise when they are flying. And in fact, their metabolism is so high that they would die of hunger. They would starve to death every night if they didn't have this adaptation where their whole metabolism slows down. They go into a state of what's called torpor, sort of like a mini hibernation, where their heart rate goes way down, their body temperature goes way down, and that's how they can survive till the next day. And this is the other thing that I just find amazing about hummingbirds is, so they have a series of adaptations that allow them to do this amazing flight that they do, this very precise positioning where they can get their beak right up next to a flower and just put it in and take it out without having to perch or anything. So part of that is they have a very dense array of retinal neurons. So their eye, their visual system is very, very precise in a way that other organisms don't really match. And then they also have the brain region that's used for processing that visual information is very large and presumably complex and doing a lot of interesting work. And so we're going to go ahead and watch this slow-mo flight video. And you know what, actually, I apologize. I'm going to stop the share real quick because I'm not sure that I did the sharing in the special mode that allows it to show video particularly well. So let me make sure, yeah, I didn't. So let me do that. So I'm glad that I caught that. Okay. It is right there. No, that's the YouTube live stream. I shared the wrong window. And this is going to get really weird in a second if I don't stop it, because you're going to see the live stream sharing with itself. Okay, try this one more time. Let me get the correct window. That's the one I want. And everything else is correct. And here we go. Let's do it this way. Hooray. Okay. So here is slow motion video. So this, I imagine this is sort of the hummingbird's eye view of what it's like when it's flying. So this is 2,000 frames a second. And I think this is a black-chinned hummingbird. I'm not positive. It wasn't labeled on Wikipedia where I found this video. But I just find this very impressive. You know, to me, hummingbirds are basically like the Keanu Reeves character in The Matrix, like Neo, right? They do bullet time. They're just like so much faster in their visual processing than the other stuff around them. I remember as a kid going to the San Diego Zoo has a really nice walk-in hummingbird aviary. And you would walk into this enclosure full of hummingbirds, and you had this little walkway as you went along, and all the plants are out in front of you. And every few seconds, a hummingbird would come zinging along the walkway, just inches from your face. And at first it was really scary, like, oh my gosh, this, you know, living dart is just flying right past my nose. But turns out they're totally fine. By the time I realized the hummingbird was even coming at me and could start to flinch away, it was already well past me and on, you know, to wherever it was going. So again, I just think they're super snazzy. Get this back in present mode so I go full screen. Okay, there we go. And here's one more fun fact about hummingbirds. So we used to think that they relied solely on nectar for food, but in fact, they eat insects a fair amount too. And if once you start looking for that, you can see it a lot. They'll glean insects off the foliage as they're flying around visiting flowers. And then they'll also fly out and they'll hawk insects in the air. You'll have these little swarms of like gnats, you know, very small flies that'll be collecting in the air. And you'll see the hummingbird just fly in there and just, they look like they're, you know, just zipping around to little invisible points in the air. But what they're doing is they're catching insects and feeding on those. So, you know, the nectar is still their main energy source, but they also get some protein and vitamins and stuff from the insects. Yeah, that was what I just explained. Oh, and here's some fun images of hummingbird reproduction. So here's a hummingbird nest with 2 eggs in it. And as a rule, they lay 2 eggs. And there is the mother hummingbird incubating the eggs. Hummingbirds don't share nesting and child rearing duties. The males mate with the females and then they're gone. You know, they don't stick around. All the raising of the next generation is handled by the female hummingbird. So there she is. This looks like maybe an Allen's or female Rufous. They look pretty similar in the females, with her 2 chicks. And they're anxiously awaiting some nectar that she's going to regurgitate there. And here are the chicks getting close to being able to fly. So as you can see, they pretty much fill up their nest pretty thoroughly. And just one more sort of interesting fact about hummingbirds, that they're very diverse. Those of you who've been fortunate enough to travel to the tropics, you know, in Central America or South America, you have many hummingbird species to enjoy down there. You know, we have relatively few hummingbirds north of the Mexican border, but if you go, and a lot of those are along the southern edge of the country, but if you go south, you start finding lots and lots of hummingbirds. So 163 just in Ecuador. That's a lot of hummingbirds to keep track of. Okay, so that is it for the first part, and I want to have a pause and kind of dip back in and see what folks think of all that. Oh, and you know what, I did not mention, but there are 2, I put 2 feeder cams in the meeting. So if you look at the users in our Zoom meeting, there's cam 1 and cam 2. So cam 1, here I can spotlight it so it'll bring it up in the live stream. So cam 1, this is, oh, and there's a hummingbird. Perfect timing. What can I say? So that's a female Allen's, probably, potentially a female Rufous. There are Rufuses around right now, as we'll talk about in a minute. But that's a female Allen's. Those are the feeders outside my bedroom window, is cam 1. And then cam 2, let's see if I can figure out how to do that. Cam 2 is the feeders outside my kitchen window. So it was a fun thing to do. It's a rainy day. What am I going to do? I'm going to put my feeders on the Zoom hangout.
Is that a lesser goldfinch on cam 1 that we just saw?
Quite possibly, although I did not notice. Let me go look. If I can- Oh yeah, there's a lesser goldfinch down at the bottom. I was torn, how much to zoom in with the camera. So it's sort of a compromise. I wanted you to be able to see the hummingbirds because we were talking about hummingbirds, but I could also pull out on if I set up the camera differently so you could see that whole feeder sock. So there's a lesser goldfinch down there at the very bottom. And I've had scrub jays here taking the peanuts out, and hooded orioles coming throughout the day. So it's a lot of, even though it's pretty rainy, not a super active day at the feeders, but still there's some good birds to see there. All right, let me go back. Yeah, okay. So any other questions or comments as we're kind of at a break here? And again, this is a chance you can put your hand up, or you can just unmute and shout it out. Don't be shy. Everybody wants me to finish quickly so they can go see the cattle egret. That's what I'm going to assume this means. All right, so let's go on and continue then and talk about our specific local hummingbirds that we have. Let's see. This is what I want. Okay. Oh, so here, this is the eBird histogram of the regularly seen hummingbird species in Santa Barbara County. And if you look there, it looks like there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, but actually there's only 6 species represented there, because those 2 thick lines towards the bottom, that's Allen's and Rufous/Allen's. And this reflects the fact that I was just talking about with that hummingbird at my bedroom window, that for the females and the immatures, the Rufous and the Allen's hummingbirds are very hard to distinguish from each other in the field. So, we have Allen's here year round. We get Rufous here in the spring primarily, but a little bit in the fall, but mostly in the spring. And then there's a slight chance of an overwintering Rufous hummingbird. We've had them, I think, 2 or 3 times on the Carpinteria Christmas count, just one single bird. So it kind of makes for this philosophical question, like if you see an immature bird and or a female, and it's not the right time of year for there to be Rufous around, do you report it as an Allen's? It's probably an Allen's. I'm lazy. I tend to just call them Rufous Allen's throughout the year, so I don't have to really keep track of, oh, is this the right date when it might be likely to be a Rufous? So that's where people like that, like me, are the ones that are responsible for this Rufous Allen's line that continues throughout the year. But you should basically look at this Rufous line and realize that, yeah, after the middle of May, the vast majority of these Rufous Allen's being reported in Santa Barbara County are in fact Allen's. So really, again, there are 6 species represented here. And if you look throughout the year, you can see that for most of the year, we really only have, at least in the winter months, let's say, we really only have 2 hummingbird species that we're seeing a lot of. That's the Anna's, which is by far the commonest bird reported in eBird lists throughout the year. And then the Allen's, which is also pretty common throughout the year. And then the other ones are more seasonal. So the black-chinned hummingbird shows up to breed and sticks around and then leaves in the fall. The Costa's hummingbird is kind of similar, kind of shows up in the spring. There's a fair number of them, and then it tapers off. And really, we have just little numbers of them throughout the year, like the one in Craig's yard that Jenny and Craig helpfully supplied for the Christmas count last year. Thank you, guys. That was great. The Rufous shows up really just during migration and just a few scattered reports the rest of the year. Allen's is here year round. And then the Calliope hummingbird just in the spring, and then it's gone again. So if you think about it, this month, we're right here in mid-April. This is hummingbird season in Santa Barbara County, because you can see every single species that we regularly get, and they're all coming through the coastal plain, put a hummingbird feeder out. I put that hummingbird feeder outside my bedroom window, and the very first hummingbird I saw there was a beautiful male Calliope hummingbird. So that was great to see. And then the next day I saw a black-chinned hummingbird. So this is a great time if you're interested at all in hummingbirds, get out there and look at those hummingbirds, because there's a lot of them out there right now. Okay, but let's talk species. So this shot that I've been using so far throughout the presentation is, of course, an Anna's hummingbird. Oh, you know what? Let me do a quick poll for input. Go ahead and if enough people would like me to play hummingbird vocalizations, hummingbird sounds, let me know. Like you can just, unmute and say yes, or you can.
Yeah, I would.
Brody would like. Okay, Brody, you get the overwhelming vote. One vote from Brody is enough for me. So let me go ahead and play you an Anna's hummingbird. I believe I can do this. So Brody, give me a thumbs up if you can hear that. Excellent. So that is the song of the Anna's hummingbird, which here throughout the year around here. Very distinctive. All right, let's continue. Oh, and this is its display flight. So the male hummingbirds tend to do this very dramatic display flight. And in the case of the Annas, it goes way up in the air and then it comes zinging down and does a tight little turn at the bottom. So it sort of forms a J shape. And these shapes of the male's display flight are distinctive, and it allows you to identify the species. So that's the Annas, and it makes a sharp took sound at the bottom. I cut this out of the Sibley guide and pasted it in here. So that's where that description comes from. There was one other thing I was thinking of showing. We'll come back to it later. I want to keep moving, but for another hummingbird, I'm going to try and do this. Oh, okay, so this is fun. So I've always really liked this painting. This is a famous painting by Franz Winterhalter. He was a court painter. He was a famous portraitist in the middle of the 1800s. And this is a famous painting of the Empress Eugenie of France, surrounded by her ladies in waiting. And the thing that I think is cute is that this lady in waiting, Anne de Essling, she is the Anna of Anna's hummingbird. So a French ornithologist who described Anna's hummingbird named it after this well-known noble lady, because he thought she was very beautiful and he thought this was one of the most beautiful hummingbirds. So he immortalized the bird with her name, or immortalized her with the bird's name. Anyway, he named it after her. And once I learned that, I just thought it was really cute that in the painting, the Empress is holding this spray of flowers, and it looks like Anne Essling is kind of like a hummingbird just pointed right at it. So maybe that's not the most favorable way of remembering her, but I think it's cute. Anyway, on we go. So here is another hummingbird. And this is the other one that we have here year round. I'm kind of going in reverse order of how likely you are to see these throughout the year. So Anna's was the most commonly reported, and this is the second most commonly reported. And let's go ahead and play his vocalization as well. So if you have a hedge of Cape honeysuckle with those orange tubular flowers, you probably hear that a lot, because that's the sound that the Allen's hummingbird makes as it's chasing off its rivals. That's the zuppity chop kind of sound that it makes. And so its display flight is not quite the J that the Anna's makes. It goes way up and it comes way down, and then it kind of does this broader thing at the bottom. And it often does a shuttle flight where it'll go back and forth. And this is just fun to see. And usually when they're doing that, there's a female or something that it's trying to intimidate that's perched right at the bottom of where it's zipping back and forth. Okay, on we go. So this is the Rufous hummingbird, the male, who's fairly easy to distinguish from the Allens because he's just got that solid Rufous back all the way up and down, no green on the shoulders at all. And vocal wise, they sound pretty much just like the Allen, so that's not much help. But again, if you see those males, you know, the fact that it doesn't have the green on the back is a good sign that it's a Rufous. There's a small number of Rufous hummingbird males that have some green on the back, like an Allen's hummingbird. So in that case, you're really stuck with trying to examine the very specific details of its tail feathers, because there's a slight difference in the males in terms of their tail feathers, but that's very hard to see in the field. Like if you get a photo just right, you can see it, but otherwise you're gonna have a hard time with those. There's so, you know, telling Allens from Rufous can sometimes be a little bit tricky. So the thing I wanted to show here is I haven't been showing range maps, but I do want to show these cool status and trends maps from eBird. And this is going to take me just a second to pull up. And my apologies that I wasn't better prepared. But this is worth the wait, at least if you're someone like me. In fact, let me go ahead and I'll resume the share so you can see me kind of clicking my way through here. So if you go to eBird and you click on this science link up at the top, it takes you to this status and trends page. And from there, you can enter a species name or just the 4-character bird banding code, which is helpful. And then you'll go to this really neat, it's like a range map, but it's like a super powered range map. It basically shows you an animation throughout the year of how the population moves. And so what you can see here, in fact, let me try and fiddle with this a little bit so I can get at the controls. There we go. So if you see in the winter, they're down in Mexico, the Rufous hummingbirds. And then around now, they come up along the West Coast. They go up here. They're one of the most northerly hummingbirds in terms of their breeding range. In fact, they are the most northerly hummingbird in terms of their breeding range. No other hummingbirds get that far north. And then on their way south, if you look, they don't come back down through Santa Barbara so much. They go inland. They travel down through like the Great Basin and the Rocky Mountains. So it's this really interesting kind of circular pattern to how they migrate, which again makes spring the prime time if you want to see hummingbirds, because there's a few other species that do a similar kind of clockwise migration route through Western North America. All right, well, again, I thought that was the coolest thing. When those came out about a year ago, I was like, yes, this is the best thing since sliced bread. Okay, so there's our Rufous hummingbird. Let's go on with this one. So again, this one showed up at my bedroom window feeder just the other day, and I was really happy to see it. It's the black-chinned hummingbird, and it's gorgeous. You know, this is all I'm showing you here, by the way, are the males, kind of being lazy that way. You know, hummingbirds are very much, they're kind of like ducks in the sense that you can play the identification game on easy mode or hard mode, kind of like with a video game. So easy mode is you just identify the males and you don't worry about the females so much because the females tend to be less dramatically different. It's the same thing with hummingbirds. The males are quite distinctive with these special gorget feathers, the throat feathers that are distinctively colored, at least if the light hits them just right. Females do have distinguishing characteristics, but it's harder. You've got to really study the details. So I'm skipping over that here, but certainly, you know, it rewards further study. And the bird watchers that I look up to and want to be like someday with enough study, they're identifying the females too. So it's definitely worth checking out those details and not just doing the males, but for now I'm just talking about males. Anyway, so the male black-chinned has this black throat, which if the light hits it just right, has sort of a purple lower border. And then this white area beneath it, kind of a distinctive white collar bordering that dark, is a good way to tell. Like with an Anna's hummingbird, you sometimes see a little bit of white there. And obviously if the light is right, you can see that the Anna's hummingbird has that really colorful sort of magenta gorget, and also has gorget feathers on the crown, which the black-chinned doesn't have. But in the wrong light, when it all just looks black anyway, look for that broad white border to distinguish the black-chinned from the Anna's. And also the Anna's gorget extends back, and the black-chinned's really doesn't. It just has kind of this narrow neck without a gorget flaring out to the sides like an Anna's has.
John, could you play the song of the black-chinned?
Yeah, thanks, Amrita. I will definitely do that. Oops, sorry, I moved on. That was a short recording. So something that I noticed in that recording too, that I have noticed with black-chinned hummingbirds in the field, like all hummingbirds hum, right? Their wings make that humming sound. But when there's a black-chinned mixed in with a bunch of Rufous and Allen's and Anna's hummingbirds, the black-chinned has like a louder, deeper hum. Like I've been able to reliably find and re-find over a span of 20 minutes the same black-chinned hummingbird in a big group of hummingbirds, because I'm listening for that louder, deeper hum. So, maybe I'm completely wrong. Maybe it's just that particular hummingbird had like a weird feather malfunction and it was making it hum louder, but I'd like to believe that's true. So look for that if you're out there looking at your hummingbirds, and see if you agree that that's happening. Oh, and I may as well look at the status and trends for this one as well. So this is going to take me just a second. Chinned hummingbird.
There's a bird on your cam.
Yeah, what do we have? Oh, it looks like an oriole. Yeah, it looks like maybe a female oriole on the hummingbird feeder on cam 1. This is great. We could just bird watch. We don't have to have the meeting. We can just all watch my feeders. Or you guys could get a separate cam going for the next meeting. All I really had to do, by the way, to do these feeder cams was to put my phone in the window and join the meeting from my phone, and then kind of fiddle around with the settings so it would, show the feeder. So that's all it is. And so it's my phone in the back window and my iPad in the kitchen window, and we have feeder cams. It's like we have goldfinches on the sock there on cam 1 also. Okay, but meanwhile, let's see, I'm not paused, I am showing the share. So let's look at the black-chinned hummingbird animation. So again, I think the reason why I find these status and trends graphs from eBird so interesting is that I've always had range maps in my field guides, and sometimes they're color coded, so it's like, oh, this is their winter range, this is their summer range. But these show a lot more detail. These show where the population actually is on different dates, and where there's more of them, where the mass of the population is, and where there's just a few outliers. So it's just really neat to see that throughout the year and see where they go. So as you can see, if you're looking just at the Santa Barbara area, they show up, they hang out during the summer, during the breeding season, and then they just start to withdraw in the fall, and away they go. So that kind of matches that green histogram line we from eBird back when I started talking about all the species together. We get them showing up in the summer and then leaving. There's not like a big migration where they're coming through and disappearing and then going back south a different way, so we don't see them in the fall. Okay. Right, so that's our black chin. Oh, and then its display flight is just this big shallow U, right, with a soft stuttering sound, as Sibley describes it. They'll just go back and forth like that. And they breed up here in the chaparral, you know, in the coastal sage scrub. You know, so if you're out hiking, there was one along the Franklin Trail, kind of near the bottom of the Franklin Trail. When you first start climbing up, right around there, there was a black-chinned hummingbird pretty reliably all last summer. So you can see them if you know where to go look. All right, this snazzy customer. This is the Costa's hummingbird. Let me play its sound. It has a really cool sound. And I'm not sure you're going to be able to hear it. It's kind of hard to hear because it's so high pitched. Can you hear that? It kind of like goes up and then just goes, you know. So this is a hummingbird that likes drier habitats. It's more of a deserty hummingbird. So you'll see it, you know, in the drier parts of Santa Barbara County. But then during migration, they'll come through, you know, the coastal plain. You might see them here too. But that vocalization is so distinctive, and I've probably identified them much more often by hearing that, and even not even being able to find the hummingbirds, because it's kind of hard to localize where that sound is coming from. But if you hear that sound, you know there's one around somewhere. And then its display flight are just these big, like, big circles. All right, and then, oh, you know what, no, we'll do status and trends on this one too, because again, I love the status and trends. And actually, we're getting close on time, so yeah, I should hurry up here. I was hoping to get this one done in 45 minutes, so we're coming right in about on schedule. So here's our Costa's status and trends graph. You see, this one never gets very far north. It's, as I say, it's a deserty species. So it's down there in Baja and western Mexico in the winter, and it kind of pushes up and reaches our area and then withdraws again. All right, and now our final entry in the regularly seen hummingbirds in Santa Barbara County is this little customer. This is the Calliope hummingbird. And let's hear what that sounds like. That hatching right here. It's kind of hard to hear. There's like a descending, like a zzz kind of sound. And its display flight. Oh, right. So in its display flight, what's sort of distinctive is that it does these pauses. It's like during the climbing part, it kind of goes, zeep, zeep, zeep. You know, it goes up a little bit at a time, and then it does its dive. And let me get the status and trends for that one as well. So the Calliope hummingbird, you know, again, it's very interesting sort of clockwise pattern where it winters down here in Mexico, and then it comes up along the coast and then spreads out and then heads back south kind of through the Rockies. So again, we really only get a chance to see it in the spring on its northward migration. So it's a good time to get out there and chase after them and see if you can find one. All right, so that does it for hummingbirds in Santa Barbara County. Let's see, is there any comments in the chat that I could respond to? Yeah, Jenny Slaughter also heard a nuthatch. Yep. Yeah, I didn't do a lot of search around. Those are just some of the recordings on xenocanto.org. If you go to Xenocanto, and they've got, lots and lots of user uploaded bird vocalizations. And it's just, very cool. You can just listen all day. There's probably, 50 recordings of any species, any given species that vocalizes noticeably.
I just saw two Rufous hummingbirds flying around the camera.
Oh, neat. Yeah. In fact, let me try to see what's, it looks like. So that looks like either a Rufous or an Allen's. It's kind of hard to tell in that. That's outside my kitchen. That one on the feeder, but that's a male. So it's either an Allen's or it's a Rufous. It's got a little bit of a greenish wash on its upper back, which it could totally be. Again, we're in the time of year when all bets are off. You could have Rufous, you could have Allen's. The Rufous actually outnumbers the Allens for a few weeks here, right in the middle of April. So for us, so that's definitely something.
Hey, John, can I ask a question?
Yeah. By the way, we're all open to questions now. I've run out of content, so. This
is an eBird question. When you show that bar, that green bar going across, over the course of a year, is that indicating the frequency of a report, or is it also include like the qualitative number of species? Like if you report 10 Allen's hummingbirds, does the bar get bigger?
No, I believe, and I could be wrong, but my understanding is that the thickness of the green bar in the eBird histograms is based on the percentage of lists that were submitted within whatever that geographic range is, so Santa Barbara County in this case, that have that species. So, a very commonly occurring species that gets reported a lot might be in, 20 or 25% of the lists, because not everybody, sees even the really common birds you don't see every time, but that's a really high percentage. So you get a really thick green box for that week of the year. Whereas one that just shows up, once or twice, out of 100 lists, it's going to be a very, very thin little green line.
So the Annas is not getting skewed by a few people seeing a whole bunch of them. It's like the incident of being seen.
Yeah, I don't think it reflects the number of individual birds being reported in the list. It's just what percentage, how many lists had at least one in it. Yeah,
John,
excellent question.
This is Lori. How often do you use the dive trajectory to help you identify?
Rarely, it's more like a fun little thing, like, oh, it's doing that particular trajectory, and oh yeah, it matches based on these other characteristics, either the way it sounds or, hopefully I get a look at it. I end up, again, I'm kind of a lazy birder some ways, and I end up reporting a lot of hummingbird species in my eBird list, just like, oh, definitely it was a hummingbird. I don't know what kind it was, it was a hummingbird. There are people who are really good at it who will you bird a lot with Mark Holmgren, and Mark has excellent ears, and Mark will say, oh yes, from the chip, that's an Anna's, or from the chip, that's an Allen's. And I'm like, okay, they're all just chips to me. So, there's a lot of rungs on the birding expertise ladder, and it is, impressive to me how high some have climbed, but I'm a long way from the zone where I can just hear a chip of a hummingbird and know what it is. But someday maybe. Thanks. And the same with the display flights. It's fun to notice it. The Anna's hummingbird, because I see that so much, that display flight, that long climb, and then that dive with the sharp little turn at the bottom, and the little chook kind of note it makes, that's distinctive. Like I'll see that and go, okay, that's a male Anna's hummingbird, and if I bother to check it out, it's always been a male Anna's hummingbird. So I just put that down as Anna's when I see that. Okay, well, any other questions while we're here chatting? I will go ahead and give you a preview. So next Wednesday, so we're not quite on the usual schedule. We've been doing these, well, twice. We've done it on Thursday. Next week, it's going to be on Wednesday because one of my invited panelists had a conflict on Thursday. So next Wednesday at 4 p.m., I plan to have a discussion, and it will be on bird watching education or teaching bird watching. And I've got a really cool group of people. It turns out, you know, people are willing to join in and do Zoom hangouts these days because they're all doing it for their jobs anyway. So it's not that big a hurdle for them to clear. But I've invited, and they have said they will be able to participate. Now I'm going to blank on some of the names because, you know, this is real time and I haven't really thought it through. Rebecca Coulter and Libby Patton and Guy Tingos and Kay Register. So those 4 participants are going to show up and talk about bird watching education. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm going to get to just ask them questions for 45 minutes. And to me, that's almost as much fun as going bird watching. So that's it, unless anybody else has any other questions or comments. I did not see any comments in the YouTube live stream chat. So, you know, those folks, I hope you enjoyed it. Or those who view it on YouTube in the future, I hope you enjoy it. And go look at that cattle egret and down at Linden Field. And I will see you guys next Wednesday. Or I'll see you out there bird watching from a safe distance. You know, let's maintain our social distances.
Thank you, John.
Okay, bye.
Yay.
Thank you.
Next time.
Good.
Nice job.
Thank you.
Thanks.
John.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
John, get some more.